Okay, so these notes are going to cover the other half of lesson 2.4. So today we're going to be talking about now knowing how to write slope, but writing now the full equation of a line that's parallel to a line and that is also perpendicular. So just as a reminder, the two forms that we are looking at for slope-intercept form, it's in the form y equals mx plus b, where m represents your slope and then y or b represents your y-intercept. Okay, make sure you guys have it open to this page so that you can copy down the notes as well. Okay, so that's the first form, slope intercept form. And then point slope form is if we are just given a point and a slope. Okay, so again, m is your slope, but then x1, y1, that would just be a point on the line. Okay. Okay, so what we're just going to practice first is just writing in slope-intercept form for each line. So when we talk about writing in slope-intercept form, okay, what we're talking about is writing or solving for y, okay? Alright, so that's what we're going to do in each one of these, okay? I'm just going to double check, make sure my thing is going. Okay, cool. Alright, so in other words, okay, what I would do first is get rid of the parentheses by multiplying the 2/3 through. So you would get 2/3 x, and then you can just plug this in your calculator. 2/3 times 3 would just be a positive 2, and then that equals y plus 5. And so what I would do is solve for y. I would subtract 5 from both sides, okay? And so what you would get is it would be y equals 2/3 x, and then 2 minus 5 would be a minus 3. So that would be your slope-intercept form. Okay. For this one, same idea. So multiply the 3/4 through, so you get 3/4 x, okay? And then 3/4 times a -4 would be a -3, and that would equal y minus 2. And so when I would add 2 to both sides, okay, I would get y equals 3/4 x, okay, and then -3 plus 2 would be a -1, okay. So this should be a review from Algebra 1, okay, nothing new there, okay. But now we're going to incorporate what we did yesterday with what we're doing today. Okay, so it says write the slope-intercept form of the equation line through the given points. Okay, so this is again actually just another type of review. Okay, so to find slope, remember slope, okay, you need to do y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Okay, so this is x1, y1, this is x2, y2, and so you're just plugging it in. So in other words, it would be 4 minus a -4. Okay, don't drop the negative, and then -1 minus the -2. Okay, and so you would get a double negative is really here and here, so it would really be 4 plus 4, which is 8, and then -1 plus 2 is just 1, so 8 over 1 is just 8. Okay, so that's your slope. And then what we do is we just pick a point. You can pick any one of these points. Let's just pick, let's say, like this point. Okay. If you also want to do it this way, this is another possible way. You can call this x, you can call this y, and you can just plug it into y equals mx plus b and solve for b. Okay. So in other words, it would be -4 is y equals 8 times -2 x plus b. Okay, and so it'd be -16 plus b equals -4. And so then adding 16 over, you would get b equals, that would be 12. Okay, and so your final answer would be y equals your slope, 8, x, and then plus b, 12. Okay. Okay, let's try this one again. So again, find the slope. Okay, so this is x1, y1. This is x2, y2. So it'd be m equals y2, 4 minus y1, -1, divided by x2, 0 minus x1, 5. So in other words, it would be positive 5 on top over, just be careful, it's 0 minus 5, be -5. And so your slope would be -1. Okay. All right, so then from there, you're writing in slope-intercept form, but the thing is, I noticed, okay, your y-intercept is where x equals 0. So in other words, that point right there is your y-intercept, so you could just take the y value, which is 4. And so your answer would be y equals be -1x plus 4. Okay, or in other words, y equals negative x plus 4. Either answer is fine. Okay. Okay, so again, that was just review of how to write the equation of a line. Okay. Okay, so here's where we're gonna interchange, okay, and this is what we're gonna do the rest of the time. It says write the slope-intercept form for each equation described. So like, here's what the question will read. It'll say through the point -2, -4, parallel to the line y equals 3/2 x plus 4. You're actually gonna start by reading this way. I'm going to do it in a different color. Okay. So what I'm going to start off with is just looking at this line, you're going to figure out the slope. The slope of this line is just what number is sitting in front of x. Okay, so in other words, the slope would just be 3/2. Okay. From yesterday, you need to then look at, you're talking about the line that's parallel to that line. So now what I'm going to do is to find the parallel slope, I need to find the slope that's parallel. Well, parallel slopes are the same. So in other words, it would just be the same 3/2. Okay? And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through this point. Okay? So that point, we're going to say this is x, this is y. And so what I'm going to plug into is y equals mx plus b, like this. Okay? So how am I going to do that? It's going to be y is -4 equals mx, so it would be 3/2 times x is -2, and then plus b. Okay, I want to get rid of this fraction first, so I'm solving for b. So I would do 3/2 times -2, which is going to be a -3 plus b, and then that equals -4. Okay, and so what I would do is I would add 3 over, and so you would get -1 equals b. So now what you're going to do, and this is the last part, you're going to take this part here, your slope that's parallel, this part here, and you're going to plug it into this formula. Okay, so in other words, it would be y equals -3/2 x, and then b would be -1, and that's your answer. Okay, so like there's really only one extra step that we didn't do yesterday that's getting done today, but that's the idea. Okay. Okay, let's try another one like this. Okay, so same idea. We're going to read this way. Okay, so we're going to start off with finding the slope of that line. So the slope of this line would be just what's sitting in front of x. So it would be -4/3. Okay, and so then what we're going to do is we're going to read what equation we're writing. So we're writing it parallel to. That means the slope from yesterday. Parallel to means it's the same. Okay, so this is going to be the slope I am using. Okay. Okay, and then through the point would be x and y. So you're plugging into y equals mx plus b and solving for b. Okay, so it'd be -1 y equals your slope, -4/3 times x is -3 plus b. Okay. And so what I would get is I would get -4/3 times -3 is going to be a +4 because it's double negative plus b equals -1. And so then from there, subtract 4, you would get b equals -5. And so then taking what I bubbled in, my final answer would be y equals -4/3 x minus 5. Okay. We're now going to try perpendicular to. Okay, so perpendicular to is going to be just one extra step. Okay, so remember, with perpendicular slopes, they're opposite reciprocals. So I'm going to still read this way. Okay, but now here's what I'm going to start with. The slope of this line right here, okay, is just going to be 4. Okay, and so from there, you need to figure out the slope perpendicular. Okay, now remember the trick I showed you from yesterday. If it's not written as a fraction, you can write it always over 1. Okay, so opposite reciprocal, I'm going to flip the sign, so instead of positive, it would be negative, and then flip the number, so instead of 4 over 1, it becomes 1 over 4. So your total slope that's perpendicular would be -1/4. Okay, everything else is the same. This is x, this is y, and so I'm just plugging it in. So it'd be y equals mx plus b, okay, and so it'd be -5 equals your slope -1/4 times x, which is 4, plus b. Okay. And so negative 1/4 times 4 is going to be a negative 1, plus b, you can just plug that in your calculators, equals negative 5. And then add 1, you would get b equals negative 4. Okay. And so I'm plugging what I circled into my equation. So the slope, or the equation line perpendicular, would be negative 1/4, y equals negative 1/4 x minus 4. Okay. So it's basically the same thing, just that one extra step. All right, we're going to try this again. So read this way, okay? So here's what I'm going to start with. The slope of just that line is the number sitting in front of x, so it'd be 1/3, okay? Now I'm going to read, okay, it's perpendicular to, okay? So perpendicular means I'm doing the opposite reciprocal, so that's what we did yesterday. So you're going to switch the sign, so it's going to become negative, but then it's going to become, instead of 1/3, it's going to become 3/1. Okay, so in other words, it's negative 3/1, or that also reduces to just be negative 3. So this is the slope you're using. Okay, right there. Okay, this is x, this is y. Okay, and so, just a second. Yeah, go ahead. Okay, sorry about that. Put this back on. Okay, so like I was saying, okay, so then from there, you're going to do y, so it's 2, equals, now the slope I bubbled in is just negative 3, so no fractions, that's nice. And then that's going to equal negative 2 plus b. Okay, and so in other words, it would be a positive 6 plus b equals 2, and subtract, we would get b equals negative 4. Okay, so then from there, you would do y equals your slope, negative 3x minus 4. Okay. Okay. Okay, so then this one, okay, here's what I want you guys to do. I'm gonna stop the video for now, okay, and then what I'll do is I'll post this answer key, okay. I want you guys to try, like, with each other 9 and 10, okay. So they're similar to 7 and 8, okay, but again, I will post this answer key, and then once you guys are done, feel free to do the 2.4 day 2 worksheet. That will be due on, what is it? That'll be due when I get back, so it'll be due Tuesday. Okay? Okay. Cool. You guys can slide off. Thanks.